up ahead. Affirmative 612.
This week on the Wealthy Pilots podcast, Scott, we've talked about some other airlines plans. So let's talk about United this week, right? So the cash balance plan that United's got going on, opt in, opt out, kind of the same conversation we had a couple of weeks ago about American, but now for the United side of things. So what's going on, my friend, and what do we need to know?
Got a few questions about this. So I wanted to, from some clients, so I wanted to throw a little bit of information out here and make sure we're addressing it. What's interesting with these cash balance plans is they're trying to accomplish the same. They're all trying to solve the same problem, which is we're overfunding a pilot's 401k from employer contributions,
and we don't want to be in that business.
Yeah, and it's just the math, right? I mean, hey,
right, yeah.
$70,000 limit, and maybe a little bit higher with the catch up if you're over 50. But there's enough going in from the company that it's overfunding that 401k. And so right now, for certain airlines, when they overfund the 401k, everything else turns into taxable income and it just hits the pilot's payroll. I mean, you're not losing money necessarily, but for a lot of our guys and gals that are in those really high tax brackets, if I had an option to do something else with that, I might want to, because I don't want it to hit my payroll. Maybe I don't need the money right now. I don't need the cash flow. I want it for later. A lot of our highly paid executives in airlines and other companies, have something that's called deferred compensation. This is something similar to that. Actually, Delta just rolled out a deferred compensation plan too. We did a podcast on that a while ago, but this is a little bit like that. It's a defined benefit plan, but this cash balance plan basically works as an extra tax-deferred pre-tax bucket that's going to catch the spillover from the 401k.
Yeah, that's definitely a pro, right? It's got this huge tax-deferred growth potential.
Yeah. And it's interesting on that topic when we talk about tax-deferred. I know we got our standard tax graphic. You guys can pop up here, Mark. When we look at this middle bucket here, this pre-tax bucket, when we talk about, hey, should I be in pre-tax or Roth? Is one better or worse than the other? To me, it depends on one thing. What is the tax rate now versus what is the tax rate going to be when I take the money out of the account? That's the only thing that matters mathematically from hey, what's the net of what I'm going to get later? Now, it ends up being a little bit more complex than that in retirement, because you have second and third order effects of what happens when I touch the money. Okay. So in this pre-tax bucket, my income is going to be reduced by however much money that can go in there. So that's what we like about this cash balance plan, right? This cash balance plan that's new for United this year. I can put money in there instead of realizing it in my pay. Now, what's unique about the United one is they're giving the pilots an opportunity. Do I want to put it in the cash balance plan, or do I want it to go into their retirement health account? Basically, it's an HRA, RHA kind of account. So the active HRA covers medical expenses while you're employed, and then the RHA covers medical expenses. It's kind of like an HSA type of account. After you leave.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so what's nice about that is there's the ability to pay for medical expenses down the road in a tax-free way. And I like that a lot. I mean, medical expenses tend to be the second largest expense behind taxes in retirement. So if we can have some money that can go in tax-deferred, grow tax-deferred, and then come out tax-free, it's like a triple tax benefit. What I'll say on that topic, though, is you kind of have to look and look at your broader plan and see what makes sense for you. Okay. Now, unfortunately for the United guys, they do not have the option to opt out. They actually can choose what allocation they want to go into the cash balance plan or into that healthcare plan. I'll just say it there. There's a couple different sub accounts, but let's call it the healthcare plan. And so, you might say, hey, if my priority now, like one gentleman I was talking to, shout out to Jim. He said, hey, I'm going to have TRICARE for life. And, I'm already getting money in an old HSA. I don't want to overfund that because I think I'm going to have pretty good coverage for healthcare. So it's like, all right, so we kind of had a quick exchange around that on making sure that we're not overfunding that, but still putting a little bit of money in there because you still have some premiums to pay and some other expenses that could come up, co-pays or whatever the case is. In addition to that, he's got some other policies in place that are offsetting or they're insuring against long-term care. And so he's kind of got that plan already in place to address some of those issues. So he needs a little bit less funding there. And with where he's at from an income standpoint right now between him and his wife, it makes a lot of sense to prioritize reducing current taxable income. And so it's like, all right, maybe load a little bit more into that cash balance plan. Well, if you're in, if maybe your spouse isn't working and, you don't have some of those military benefits from time and service, you might want to put a higher percentage, maybe all of it for a few years into that one of those healthcare plans. Obviously I would tend to think more of going down the path of the RHA, but even inside of the healthcare plans, you might want to diversify a little bit, right? If I end up on disability for some reason and I have some healthcare expenses that are maybe not fully covered for me or my spouse here short term while I'm working, might be nice to have a little bit of money sitting there that I could access.
Yeah, especially if you've got some health issues or you kind of expect some of those heavy medical costs, right, in the future, it can certainly be beneficial in that regard. Much like an HSA, yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Hey everyone, real quick, if you haven't grabbed Scott's Financial Flight Control Toolkit yet, now is the time. This is packed with tons of helpful resources and tools like this, Scott's book, The Dichotomy of Wealth, which is a pilot's guide to maximizing wealth and cash flow in retirement. You also get access to some great guides like this one, Advice Matters, which breaks down 4 key ways a good financial advisor can help you boost your returns over time. And guides like this one on the pitfalls of emotions when it comes to investing, and this one on the HCM byline investment strategy, and more. So if you'd like your very own Financial Flight Control Toolkit, just click the link in today's show description, and Scott and the team will be happy to get one sent your way at absolutely no cost to you.
So, to me, like if I was kind of weighing it out and saying like the pros or cons, like, hey, is this bad for me or is this fishy? I would say no. I do wish the airlines would always just give people a chance to opt out if they want. Like, hey, if it spills over and I can just take that contribution as a payroll, increase basically on my W-2, and I can do what I want with that cash. I like people to have that flexibility. However, that's not really the case here. So it's got to go into one of those 2 buckets. So you could say that's kind of a con, but there's no choice there. So, but if I'm looking at the pros and the cons, the pros of the cash balance plan, I'm going to be able to reduce my taxable income this year. That's good, especially for folks in near the back half of their career, and they're in those highest earning years. They're probably getting into a tax bracket that starts with a 3. That's normally a good signal that it's a good time to do anything we can to reduce our taxable income now. And so that would be probably the first priority for someone in that scenario. Additionally, I would still say, though, regardless of where you're at, it's probably worth looking and saying, hey, does it make sense to fund a little bit into these healthcare sub-accounts? Especially if you're a younger guy, you got time on your side. It's nice that you can put some money into those healthcare savings account and then give them time to grow. So maybe you just load them in there with, $10,000 each for a couple of years and then let them sit there knowing they're going to grow and be a decent size account for you when you're older. So that part's kind of nice too. One other con about the market-based plan is, I would say the lack of investment options, right? Compared to if I was investing in my own. But again, it's just kind of limited, but you don't have a choice. You got to fund it either there or over on the healthcare side, which is going to have similar investment options. So,
well, let's kind of look at it like how to think of it like a no BS kind of way, Scott, for people. Make it easy, right? Pick the cash balance plan if you want to build a bigger retirement nest egg, right? Not just the health expenses versus like the HRA, right? So kind of weighing these 2 out.
Yeah, I mean, and if you're already maxing your 401k and you want more tax deferred savings, that's another perfect example of why you would pick the cash balance plan and prioritize it there.
Right.
And again, that's a little bit more about flexibility and portability at retirement. Okay?
Makes sense. Yeah.
If you're looking at the HRA, RHA plans, to me, it makes sense to have some there, especially if you don't have some of the, maybe TRICARE benefits that the military guys have.
Yeah.
It makes sense to fund some there because you might not think you're going to have serious medical costs in retirement, but the data just doesn't really support that. You're probably going to have some. So it's nice to have some money sitting there in a tax-free account that you can pull from.
Especially if you eat a lot of steaks when you're on your layovers and you're like me and you're rocking some heart issues, you might want to consider it, right? So,
I mean, there is always a day of reckoning for us, no matter what we're doing currently. So yeah, we might have some that probably lies in wait for all of us. So
yeah, for sure.
The other part of it too, I think, you get a little bit of flexibility from a tax standpoint there too. I mean, you're probably going to have some healthcare expenses in retirement. So having something out there that's not all in pre-tax can just make sense. And then the last part that I'll say about that is all this kind of feeds into, that something we've talked about a handful of times in the last couple of episodes. You want to be thinking about the tax disposition of your retirement assets, because if we have, again, looking at that graphic from earlier, if we have everything in that pre-tax bucket, I'm telling you, go talk to a guy or gal who retired a couple years ago. They are going to tell you save in those other two buckets. Okay. So use their hindsight as your foresight. And that's a lot of what we're trying to do for folks is take the lessons learned from those retirees and then say, hey, what would I do different? And many times they would tell you, man, I would put some of my money in Roth.
All right. Well, if you need help, again, Scott's here to help with this conversation. He is the airline advisor. So we'll have all the links in the show descriptions below. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Apple or Spotify, and of course, right here on YouTube. And definitely have a conversation and get yourself onto the calendar, have a chat with Scott quickly, especially if this topic is important to you. And we'll see you next time here on the Wealthy Pilots Podcast with Scott Osborn.
Information is for illustrative purposes only and does not constitute tax, investment, or legal advice. Always consult with a qualified investment, legal, or tax professional before taking any action.